Welcome to another episode of Video Store Rejects. This is a podcast where we discuss directors' filmographies and our favorite film franchises. I'm your host, Cody House. I have two returning guests today, Sean and Dan. Welcome back, guys. How are you all?
Good. How are you? Thank you.
You guys have most of the week off, right, for the holiday?
I do. You don't.
I do not. I have tomorrow off, but I said I would go into work on Friday and Saturday because we're that busy. So, but I'm getting paid a little extra, so I like making money. So I'll be going in.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I feel you. Unfortunately, I got to work this whole holiday too, but I get Christmas off, and that's a little more important of a holiday to be off for me, anyways. But glad you got the week off. That's nice. And today we are discussing perhaps maybe one of Ridley Scott's most forgettable films he's ever made. We'll get into it, maybe why that is. It's his retelling of the Moses story, Exodus, Gods and Kings. But before we get into the movie, what are your guys' general opinion on Ridley Scott as a director?
I think we both like Ridley Scott. I think he's very interesting. I like his he's got some neat visions of things. So I enjoy his stuff. Whatever he produces. I mean, we generally will watch anything that he's made. You agree, Sean?
Yeah. I did not get a chance to listen to the episode that you guys did on Prometheus, but that'll come up, I'm sure, when we talk about this one. Because it's very much a trend for him during that decade.
Some of the
I guess that's true. I guess he did play a lot in religion and like questioning man's purpose and why are we
same sets.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
But we're big Aliens fans. I mean, Alien is one of my favorite movies that ever. So we like that. But it's interesting. I think it'll be an interesting conversation. So,
however, I would like to have a word with the editor.
Yeah.
Well, we will have. I think there's a reason because watching the movie, I had not seen this movie before till having to decide to do Ridley Scott films as a director series, and I'm like, I feel like something's missing, and I'm like, well, at least I know what's happening because, I know this story because even if I wasn't raised in church or read passages of the Bible, I'm like, there have been other movies about this story, right? So I know what's really going on. But had I had no idea about the Moses story, I'd have been like, okay, what's happening now? I don't.
And yet at the same time, it was still bloated.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, how does this feel like there's chunks of this movie missing, but at the same time it feels overstuffed and like too much going on.
Are interesting and unique and very authentic for him in terms of his directorial vision. And then you're just like, and then there's like, another 40 minutes.
I think it's very long. It is a long movie. I think that it starts off, for me, the best parts come post exile. The beginning part with the battle. The battle didn't feel that opening battle, whatever it was, where they raid whatever that village or whatever. It didn't feel authentic to me. Like something. It was a show. I mean, it was kind of.
That's the same
kind of entertaining, but something it was hollow, something hollow about it. Like it didn't come off as, it didn't put you there. And a lot of his other stuff, like you felt in his movies, I feel like he could put you in that scene a lot more successfully than he did with this one. It was, I don't know, but once you get past that and once Moses gets exiled, I feel like everything got a little better. The acting got better. The scenes got better. The story got a little more interesting. The plagues were, I was in awe of that. I thought that was done very well. Um, and there were I actually liked the little kid as the voice of God, even even though I thought that was such an interesting take, that interpretation. I just thought that was kind of neat. And of course, that's not text based or story based or whatever, but that I just thought that was something that was different. So I liked that.
I have a confession.
Yeah.
The first time I was watching it, maybe I wasn't paying enough attention, but the kid that they cast to be the voice of God and his son at the time looked way too similar. So I found it really distracting at first, and then it reset.
But it didn't even click with me.
Yeah.
But I thought that was an interesting choice, and I like when people try things that are different. Not everything has to hit perfectly with how other people have done things. When you look at other Moses stories and Prince of Egypt and which is really good. 10 Commandments, things like that, which are more faithful, to the actual story. But I think a lot of the messaging was there, and it's that kind of wrestling with faith thing motif, which was, in and out of it all the time.
Which is a clear delineation he made with Ben Mendelsohn.
Yeah, I think parts of it wasn't as terrible as you thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be awful because everybody's like, "Oh, this movie's really,
insufferable,
really bad." But we made it through. I never stopped it. I didn't turn it off. We paid attention to the whole thing. I thought it was going to be really, really bad, but the parts of it, I have to admit, I was entranced. Parts of it, I was really entranced. Those parts where he, surprisingly to me, really tried to show that kind of idea of power of divinity, that kind of really surprised me, that he really kind of went all in with things like the plagues, and that he really went all in with the power of Moses' God. You know what I mean? He really did kind of say, I want to show what this guy could do. Because that scene where Moses is like, we've been essentially, they banned that kind of army that's disrupting everything and burning things down and whatever. We just watched it last night, so it's fresh in my memory. And he has the meeting with God's messenger there, and he says, you're not doing things fast enough, whatever. And he's like, so you want me to do nothing? He says, no, I want you to watch. And I thought that was so powerful. So there's these little mini powerful moments in an otherwise kind of meh kind of film, but there's things that are really come off really good. And if he had cut it down, if it was maybe an hour, 40 minutes or something, it probably could have been a pretty killer film. Not a great film, but it would have been, I think it would have been better.
It was tough because the momentum would he just ruined his own momentum because it would just drag. And I felt like he was like, all right, I was just like at the timeline.
I wish he cut off brother. Kind of, I don't know. It's such a weird, it's so hard to critique because it's such, I don't know. I don't want to say it's a terrible movie, but I think you could cut out a lot of people, and you could cut out a lot of scenes, and a lot of actors. Like, I think Sigourney Weaver in there was just kind of self-indulgent. You really didn't need her character.
Well, yeah, I'm going to agree that they didn't need her, especially since they pretty much cut her down to 2 scenes in the movie,
right.
and
right.
in one scene she hardly says anything, and in the other scene it's her and Joel Edgerton having a conversation, and that's it. Like, yeah, you could have cut her character out of the movie. Nothing against Sigourney Weaver, but it didn't need to be there.
Yeah, it just seemed
it was distracting.
Yeah, why even have it? But the other, I think Christian Bale was better as the beaten down kind of shepherd kind of Moses than he was as the Prince of Egypt, Moses. I think he
had trouble trying to be charismatic, but not charismatic. Like, that false was not good.
It's also hard because they're all out of place because none of them look
None of
You have to buy into the fact that they're
completely
Egyptian or Middle
yeah.
Eastern, to say the
Well,
least.
and I think that's the biggest criticism this movie got, and why I think a lot of people were just like, "Oh, this movie's awful," because they completely whitewashed the majority of this cast, and like their defense for casting Christian Bale as Moses is like, "Oh, we need a named movie star for the lead role." Okay, I'm pretty sure you could have found an actor of color to play Moses that is a well-known actor that is of similar talent of Christian Bale.
Yeah.
They did try with Ramses. They tried to get Javier Bardem or Oscar Isaac. Both of them turned it down. I don't know if they weren't interested at all, or they like heard like it's gonna mostly be white actors in the role, and they're like, no, thank you, and we'll just go do Dune in a few years.
And I think that is kind of what takes you out of that time and that place and that in the location, and it's you really, it puts too much effort on you to stretch your imagination so far. You know what I mean? Back in the like whatever the 60s and stuff, they didn't care back then, and they had like John Wayne playing funded. Genghis Khan, and people were playing whoever, but it's now it's
this was 2014.
Yes,
there's the talent, and you can find them. And yeah, when 10 Commandments is made in that era of Hollywood, like if you're like a fraction of some other ethnicity besides Caucasian or European, even if you're Jewish, they're like, oh, well, you can play whatever role we need you to play that's not a white person in the in the movie.
We have adopted as white.
Which is why I guess Yul Brynner played, the part in the 10 Commandments, because I forget, he's like.
Oh, I thought you're going for a different one. That one.
Yul Brynner's, I think he's Russian.
Yeah, he's definitely not the King of Siam, but that's
okay. But yeah, I don't know. But in 2014, and I did not really like Joel Edgerton at all as Ramses.
He's so abrasive, but not anything other than abrasive.
That was it was hard to understand that, how they wrote him too, because sometimes he seems like he wants to be this, very powerful, strong, tough pharaoh guy, but he seems so weakened around everyone at the same
like his
time.
own dad didn't like
it. Was just a hard. It was. To be fair, that's the character, but it was hard to buy it. It was hard to buy into him. I think both in the way he played Ramses and just how he looked and how they made him up and stuff like that. The story itself, parts of it weren't bad, and some of the scenes were great. The scenes where the chariots kind of collapse off the side of the mountain, that was great. I understand the sword scene, and at the end, and how they parted the sea. You never get to see the Red Sea part. Which is a deviation from that's such a big thing for the story. But they did it with they showed that it parted with the sword. He throws the sword into the water, and then you see the hilt, the next day. That was a different way of doing it. It would have kind of been neat to see how he did the parting thing, but I think he was looking at a different angle of it, and it wasn't terrible. It was interesting, but it didn't. But again, it takes you out. It takes you out of that story. You know what I mean? But when the sea comes crashing back on everybody, that's great. I
miss the whale
really
though,
good.
from like the Princess the whale and that.
I think there could have been a lot more done with that. I do think there could have been a lot more done with that.
I think they were going for a more realistic approach. I'm not sure if that was the right move, because you're also still you still have to have the plagues. You still have to have all these things that you can't really explain in a realistic story. So it's like, if you're gonna do this story, then you just need to embrace like what we know from this story, regardless of your beliefs. Like that's what works about the story, and I think that's what it's kind of trying to tote the line on both.
And it's
And
tough.
it
I mean, when it first started, first of all, you have the chariots in the army riding in, directed by Joel Edgerton as a general. They put a big emphasis on that. Into the same valley where the Prometheus landed. It's the same exact setup. It's everything, beat for beat.
Pokemon alert.
So are you saying Exodus was just a trial run for them to approve Alien Covenant?
I mean,
she did have that theory.
Because it looks, it's the exact same location.
She did have that theory.
And then you can see the CGI army just being doubled, and then you're like, is this him trying to do like a Kubrick kind of feel? And it's just really muddy. That first 20 minutes is muddy. And then you can cut 20 minutes everywhere else.
I'm with you. It is probably the most boring part of the movie because like we don't get the setup of what we know. Like I'm like, okay, so Moses is like Maximus in this story, basically.
Yeah, and we get the point. We get the understanding that the actual king, the actual pharaoh, is not well liked, not well versed, and we don't really need that scene to establish their bond, especially since they don't leverage that bond.
But that bond, but that thing about that bond between them is that it never seems like it's really that tight,
right? And
whereas in other things like in Prince of Egypt, he really did think he was.
Yeah, I just
realized that is the animated one, but they did think. They did build that connection between them where they were like brothers. You know what I mean? And this, you really didn't get that sense that they were that close. You know what I mean? It just seemed they were raised together, but it didn't seem like they had that brotherly connection. You know what I mean? And that scene where Moses saves his life. And Ramses, for a second, has the spear in his hand, and he holds it like a pause. And it looked like he was gonna throw it and kill Moses. That's what it looked like.
And be like, oh no, he died.
That's what it looked like. He was like, because he looked like he was pissed that Moses saved his life and got whatever.
Yeah.
Obviously, he looked like he was mad. So he looked like he was, for a second, he thought about it. So I don't think there was that bond that you see in the other story.
No, it's the same as the one in Gladiator where Joaquin Phoenix ends up becoming the emperor, and you're like, I've seen this.
That idea where.
But that was better done too, even though like in Gladiator, Maximus and whatever Joaquin Phoenix's name is, like maybe they don't like each other, but at least like.
And the father has a preference, and we see like he's competent, and like that's the whole point. And this one just takes it. The first 20 minutes, it borrows Prometheus, it borrows Gladiator, it borrows so much of his own that he retreads that you're just like, and waiting for the bolo tie to come back.
Even Kingdom of Heaven, because I'm like, I feel like he's wanting to explore these themes again that he did in Kingdom of Heaven as well. And I'm like, you already did it in Kingdom of Heaven, and that was a box office bomb, but it's actually a good movie. Like he even explores religion in his Robin Hood film as well, which is not that great either. But it's like you kind of already did this. Why are you trying to repeat yourself?
I did not read anything about this movie. I think I read about it at the time, and I've since
we decided not to watch it. I think we're just like, we skipped it.
I think it same thing.
We just
same thing. I read about it. I was like, oh, I don't know, and then the reviews were bad.
Story, we're good. Like And then I think it also got conflated with the Noah movie that came out somewhere.
That's right. That came out the same year, which I believe was
get through.
That one was. And so, like, I kind of thought this one was also really not accurate either, and it was just like, never mind, we're good. I read the book. I guess that's probably being.
Yeah.
I did just quickly read, and that this was his brother died in 2012. Years later, he dedicates it to his brother.
He did dedicate.
And this is, I'm assuming this is him trying to figure out why bad things are happening to his brother.
Yeah. Okay. that's fair. I get that.
But if you trace it from Prometheus to this one to Covenant, you get that better through line because on its own, you're like, this makes you're going to Martian next, and you're like, okay.
Yeah, right. He does the Counselor and the Martian in between those films.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't. There's no continuity other than the fact that these are the ones where I think he's putting in his own issues and his own struggles. Lots of issues.
Yeah.
So I listened to an interview recently with Guillermo del Toro and Mike Flanagan because they both had Netflix series come out. And Guillermo del Toro says that he thinks a director's filmography is like their autobiography into like, which would make sense if someone's a little bit more of an auteur, but but Ridley Scott is not just a journeyman director. Like
he does,
but I don't know where to classify him because he does movies like The Martian or The Counselor where I'm like, okay, and sometimes they work really well, like The Martian, but other times I'm like, did you do that for the money? Did you do that because you want to work? Did you do that because you're hoping you can finance your Alien sequel?
Like Covenant is a perfect example of him as a director because it's the movie he wants to make, and then the movie the studio would pay for.
It's a compromised film of two different movies in one.
And I'm almost wondering if this one was the studio is like, we will fund a movie for you, but you need to have this many stars. And he's like, but I really want to make a movie about Moses. So, all right, I guess we're putting these people in. And I mean, like, because how else would he have landed on this? I still can't explain The Counselor, but we're going to let that one go.
That one, he wanted to work with Cormac McCarthy because he spent years trying to adapt Blood Meridian and it never happened.
That makes more sense.
So he just bought the script up as soon as he saw that it was available. And
well, that makes sense then.
And that movie has an issue that I think a lot of writers who try to write screenplays, they try to write like it's a book and it doesn't work as a screenplay and probably needed a second draft or someone to like look it over, but because they're a acclaimed writer, nobody gives them any notes because they're like, oh yeah, it's great.
Who wrote this one? I did not research at all. Sorry about that.
It's okay. I think it had several screenwriters, which is what's credited.
Which is a bad sign. At least you have a punch-up guy.
Let me see.
Can you imagine?
They've got 4 screenwriters credited. One of them is Steve Zalian. I don't know who the other 3 are. So if there's 4 being credited, who knows how many actually worked on this?
One of them wrote Assassin's Creed, so we're in really good hands here.
The movie?
The movie, yes.
Oh, okay.
One of them did write that, so
I have not had the pleasure to watch that.
Yeah.
You know what?
You can live with that.
I can live without it. I mean, that's been a rough thing for them to adapt into film.
Yeah.
It's a rough thing for the series, for them to control as a series.
But
one of the writers on this wrote Schindler's List.
Yeah, that's Steve Zalian, yeah.
And what has Adam Cooper done?
I think
it's interesting.
Is it based off of is there any base like a book or anything like that it's coming off of or any kind of other story?
Oh, you mean not the actual book?
Other than the Bible?
Yeah, you're right. Correct, yeah.
I don't think so. I know this movie had been in development for a long time, and apparently at one time Steven Spielberg was gonna tell a version of this. It's a different movie, but similar.
Yeah.
Which might have been a more interesting filmmaker to do this. I don't know. Maybe.
I was thinking a few times during the movie, I'm like, this kind of movie might work if it wasn't the Moses story, if they made it something else and did something different,
like an embattled person trying to understand. And he was a really good warrior, and then he was like a beloved person of the emperor, and then his son became emperor. And he had to battle
then
against
it was sold into
to
slavery.
to liberate the
Mm.
slaves and
Yeah,
like.
So if it was just a historical epic like Gladiator, but it's
1909.
dealing with religion too, might have been a more compelling story.
right. So,
Yeah.
Spartacus.
yeah.
Especially if it's not set in Egypt either, if we're gonna cast mostly Caucasian actors.
I like the choices I like the very random choices for people of color that they decided to insert.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like his mom, and I guess is the actor? No, the actor's playing. Well, it says the actor's playing his wife is Spanish,
And
but
so was the high priestess, I believe. She was from Game of Thrones. His mom is, I think, Marsha from Succession.
And then you got Ben Kingsley. He's not completely. I know he's like mixed, isn't he?
Yes. He's Indian.
Yes.
So
looked that up yesterday.
And then Ben Mendelsohn is Australian with Jewish heritage, though. I did look that up.
Okay.
But when they called him Viceroy, all I could think of was Star Wars, so that was also pretty bad for me.
I gotta say, he doesn't have much to do, but he is basically playing a Ben Mendelsohn type of role that he's known to be playing in these type of movies.
That's all he ever does.
Yeah.
Let me play a smarmy, rich person who's kind of evil.
A middle manager in terms of power, and you're just like, oh no, it's the same role.
Yeah, but he's good at that.
He's very good at it, but I was just like, oh no, we know that this guy can't be a good guy, and he's a viceroy. No,
don't trust a viceroy.
Star Wars guy that's a viceroy. We're done. Thank you.
Another random casting, and I feel like he doesn't really have much to do, is Aaron Paul as Joshua. Like,
I forgot he was in this.
That was a weird choice too.
Yeah.
I mean, all of them were, but at the same time, you don't really get connected to them either. You're very much an outsider to the whole thing, so you never really get connected to these other characters, which have, I mean, traditionally kind of supportive roles in the story. So
where was his brother?
You heard it. You saw him a couple times.
Aaron? Yeah, he was in the movie, but again, this movie, like, I don't know how it feels rushed and bloated at the same time, but it is.
And you're just like,
because apparently there's a 4-hour cut of this that they trimmed down to 2.5 hours. So I don't know if the 4 hours would have been torturous, or at least these characters would have had like some more development to where we might care. Because the movie doesn't allow you like to connect with Moses or any of the other Jewish characters, the Israelites, to like band with them in their quest for freedom.
And Ben Kingsley pops back up once he goes back to Memphis briefly, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this person should have more of a role.
Mm-hmm.
It was very. I can't really figure out what the movie he really wanted to make for this was. Like, what is he truly exploring? That's where I'm kind of. Because once you reframe like Prometheus and Covenant, and now the understanding of the counselor, it makes sense for what came out of all of that. And I just can't quite get to what he wanted from this, because it's definitely studio involvement at some point.
Well, or it was just such a big storyboard that they just didn't know what to do with it, so they just chopped it up into pieces and said, "Well, this might work," you know.
He initially, I guess, wanted
but
to make
it was there probably was just this huge, a giant epic that they just had to hack to pieces, you know.
Well,
or the story just got away from him, you know. That's all.
Yeah, well, 4 hours, you can't play that many screenings in a showtime. So studios want as many screenings as they can get. As well, back then, they probably would have just put this on streaming now. But yeah,
or something. Yeah,
I'm baffled as to why, like, you've pointed out maybe that there were some more interesting things that attracted him to this story, but like I don't know if it was the themes he was more interested in, and the whole Moses story of it all just muddled up what he wanted to say, or like you said, it's just too much story. Like it's just too much. It just they couldn't, and they ended up basically nobody like it's always touchy when you make movies that deal with religion or based on the Bible, but this movie pretty much displeased everyone. Even like uh, Christians were upset because it didn't follow the Bible story. Other people said it wasn't historically accurate. Of course, there were people upset with the whitewashing of the casting, and then critics are just like, it's bloated, it's a mess, it doesn't make any sense.
And so, aside from my other question, which is how much did they spend on eyeliner? Because that was significant. There was a lot of eyeliner.
Man, Ben Mendelsohn probably used most of that.
When they introduced his wife, you're like, oh my gosh, she's wearing perfect eyeliner, has bright green eyes. Oh, we know who she's going to be. That was one of my questions. The other one was just why would he initially wanted to call it? I remember he wanted to call it Exodus. It was not necessarily just this story, this kernel of a story. So I'm wondering if that was bigger, because why would they do the old man makeup poorly? At the end, I didn't think they would go that far and then have him die. So I'm wondering what else would have been in there and what he had wanted to really go into.
Yeah. It's I don't know.
I mean, I think it was worth watching the one time. I don't think you can go back and I don't think you want to go through it again. But
no.
There's pieces there that were worth saving. I think it's just
like a greatest hits off of this would be.
Yeah, I think it's just
pretty interesting.
A tough sell all around for the whole thing. But like I said, I was surprised. Like I didn't think it was as awful as
I thought it was going to be abjectly terrible.
But I do think that it may have been something that at the time there was so much negative noise about it, that you really weren't going to be able to enjoy it either way. There was a lot of negativity.
Way to ever
like nobody ever said this is a great movie.
I
think that idea of having that now that it's much later, you're kind of out of all that noise stuff, and now you can watch it and be like, okay, this movie's going to be terrible. But it's kind of nice to start with that low expectation, and then you see it and you're like, you know what? It's not that bad. It's not great.
I'm not going to, it's not like a Transformers movie, but when you watch a Transformers movie, you understand it's not going to be
it's not going to be good. It's not.
It might be enjoyable, but it's going to be this.
I mean, parts of the movie were enjoyable, and he did hit some good scenes, and
he had, and that's what's actually more frustrating is the fact that it wasn't horrible. Like I almost wish it was bad, because then if you
rewatched it, you would not like it. If you watched it again, probably be like, I don't like it.
No, this does not have rewatchability, and you hit exactly how I feel. Like I wish this movie was terrible so I could like tell you how bad it was and dunk on it and be like, oh my god, can you believe how bad this movie is? But to me, it's just kind of boring, and I think that's worse than being terrible. Because
and you're like, you could have done it. You had the potential.
Right. Like, you see that there's something sitting there. You see that there's these things just sitting there that they can't quite grab, or that they wrote all these different scenarios and storyboards, and they couldn't pull it all together in the end.
It's like the new current MCU timeline. There's just too many branches.
Yeah.
I think that's it. You wish it was worse than it was.
Or like it's like pick one. Like it's such a solid, you showed up participation trophy kind of movie. And I think I don't remember there being a ton of press on this one either. And when you look at the cast, you're like, oh my goodness, everyone's in it. And then I don't remember them talking about it. I don't remember the studio pushing this. I'm pretty sure they buried the release.
I remember the trailer, and I remember the trailer came out, and you're like, what is this? Because it was like, you're like, what are they doing here? Because it looked like, I'm like, this doesn't make sense that now they're portraying Moses as the warrior person, or a warrior in a sense. I'm like, what's going on here? But even when you watch the movie, he only does the warrior stuff like a couple times. It's not even like a major part. He's involved in the fight in the beginning. He kills a couple people in there.
But they still call him general.
Some assassins and stuff like that.
They call him general.
They still call him general. I mean, he does some stuff, but I don't know. It was just so bizarre. Like, it didn't really.
It's like they did 200 takes of each scene and picked one random one.
I don't know. It was just different. But,
like,
I remember the trailer coming out and watching that and going, no, I'm not going to watch that.
And then,
like, I'm not going to watch that.
And then the noise around Noah definitely just ended it.
I'm not going to watch that.
Totally ended
it.
That one from the same problem.
Which I think that movie was better received critically. But I remember people being very upset. And I remember we went and saw it because me and my wife always want to go see whatever movie the Christians are upset about. Like, why is this movie controversial? Why are you mad? And we're like, it's not really the Noah story.
No. And I think and so in my mind, I thought they were both kind of the same movie, essentially. Like a Shark Tale and the other one that came out around the time, like when they have.
Oh, is that?
You're like,
did Shark Tale and Finding Nemo come out close together?
I don't know if it was that one, but like for people who haven't watched them, you're like, I don't know, it's the animated underwater one, or it's the animated bug one, and somehow they both got greenlit at the same time. And
I do remember. I
almost expected.
I actually do remember some kind of side by side stuff with those two,
because it was Russell.
Because we're having two epics coming out, two biblical epics coming out,
and both of them were just like,
yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Well, if this helped him get Alien Covenant, then okay, I guess you did what you had to do, Ridley Scott.
I will watch another one of these if it gets me the third David movie.
Right?
Yes, but it just has to be just the David movie, not the.
I just want
other stuff. We just want to watch him teaching the other droid how to play the
making whatever, and like I just want the end, because this is him so clearly in that same headspace, just whatever the studio would finance and whatever he had dedicated to his brother, which sounds really of his brother, but and I think it's important to know that Ridley Scott, when you do look at his filmography, you have to really look at you have to separate out which ones did he do for money to make the movies he cared about. And and this one seems like a both.
Okay.
And that's why it's so bad, that he tried to make one that he cared about with a way to make money, and it just came out pleasing no one.
So this is very similar to his Columbus movie, but I think I'll give this one an edge up, because at least it's not like it's not changing anything, because in that one, that is clearly like them trying to put Columbus up on a pedestal, and it's like, ooh.
Now, see, if they had opposite cast in that one, that would be moderately more interesting. Not the point. But no, this is him retreading. It's like a cover band of his own greatest hits.
Yeah, it's Gladiator, Kingdom of Heaven, Prometheus. It's just like, here, let me do it again.
And I don't know why. I mean, he must have gotten some backer that said, all right, I will fund your next two movies, but this one has to be first. I want to see this movie. And he's like, and I want A-list stars in it. I want you to call in some favors and big CGI. Like, that's what it kind of feels like. He fulfilled a wish just so he could make a movie about wrestling with God, literally.
Yeah, I can't imagine the production pitch for Alien Covenant when they're like, yeah, you can do another Alien movie, but we want aliens in it, Ridley. Okay, well, what if this robot talks to this other robot and they just talk about religion and why do men even exist? How about that? Okay, long as there's like a chest burster and okay.
I'll sweeten the deal. It'll be a back burst.
Oh, yeah. Pretty much that one went.
And it's also going to come out in the year where we all use the same John Denver song. So it like just hit that point home.
I do wonder if he just had it, if he had these ideas and he was thinking, oh, maybe we'll do I'd like to do a biblical epic. I'd like to do kind of a Moses story, but he couldn't allow himself to let go of these themes that have been kind of,
which he
constantly haunting him in all these other movies.
Even subconsciously,
he couldn't let go of it enough to let the story itself breathe a little bit, and he kind of wanted to force it into this direction.
I think you brought up the point where, and Christian Bale's character says it. I'm not going to call him Moses. We're just going to call him Christian Bale's character. Says it that the Israelites are meant that he wrestled with God, and I'm pretty sure that's his whole thesis of the 2010s is I am wrestling with God.
And that becomes
he lost his younger brother Tony, so that's probably why because he dedicates the movie, and that could have been in his head too, like dealing with the grief of that.
And so I wonder what his pitch was like, where can I find a story about a man wrestling with God that will get me the funding I need? Like, I'm kind of curious who the secret producers are.
I don't know. But
I interrupted your thought. I'm sorry. Before.
Oh no, I did. You're fine. It was you had something, and then
me
totally jumped on it.
Sorry. Yeah, you had you were about to say something, and then I went off about his brother dying.
I don't remember. I don't know. It'll come back if it was something significant. Yeah. I do think part of that is just maybe he wanted to make something, but maybe he couldn't. It's just directional. Maybe he couldn't let go of his own focus to let that let the story work.
This almost sounds like we're calling Ridley Scott the Stephen King of movies. Like deal with his own demons, makes one that makes money. One for them, one for me, kind of.
I wonder if he was kind of. Did he ever say anything about it? Like, did he I'm not happy with how this worked out? Or
he's very polite about a lot of that. He's very political in his statements, typically.
Yeah.
Except recently, he's kind of gotten more shady. Like with the last duel not doing well, he blamed it on millennials for being on their cell phones. Even though he's like an 80-year-old plus man, I wonder if he knows most millennials are approaching 40.
I think that was also at the same time that his whole catalog was sold to Disney, and Disney was given censorship rights over the digital releases, and that's when they canceled David 3. So it was a lot of news all at once.
Well, yeah, because they're developing a TV series in the Alien franchise for FX. Yeah,
the guy who made Fargo, and the good season of Legion and the bad seasons of Legion.
This is, I mean, some of the themes, some of the stuff you see could be echoed in the Raised by Wolves
that he produced
series too.
That's right,
and that's a lot of religion versus science kind of stuff going on there too.
Which I thought he was, when he proposed this, I really thought we were going to get more of the back and forth between, is this really like a divine intervention, or is this like
a structure of nature? And that's where I kind of thought they were going. That's kind of interesting, because that's the same thing. I was kind of shocked that he did the plagues the way that he did them. I mean, there was an argumentation there.
Right.
That this happened because of this, and then this, and this, but It was pretty interesting.
And then he
Well,
said
yeah,
divine intervention at the end.
well, yeah, because they wrestle with Christian Bale, like everyone thinking he's crazy because they can't see the little kid he's talking to. That's the
Right.
voice of God. Everyone like his wife's like, "Well, you're crazy. You can't do this. Don't leave your family." And then like I think there's a scene where Aaron Paul's character is like watching him, and he's like, "What is he doing?" Like because he just sees Christian Bale yelling at himself, you know.
Well, there's this. There is a great the character development, where the goal, I think, well, the goal is to get Moses to kind of surrender. You know what I mean? And because the God's messenger tells him, you know, when he tells him calls them his people, and then he says, "Oh, you don't even think they're your people," you know. He says that to Moses, and I think in the end, when he throws his sword into the sea, that's what that is. That's his surrender, saying, "This is what I'm going to be." And I think that moment could have been very powerful in any other film, but by the time you get to it, it just doesn't have that same implication or amount
or denouement even
or anything.
The movie doesn't earn that emotional.
Yes,
it doesn't earn that emotional
you go
uplifting there. It's like okay.
I have to for time reference, the Pokemon Generation 9 came out Friday. So this is a lot of the guess what? Sorry.
No, it's okay. They're excited. There's nothing wrong with it.
Anyway, like what we were talking about, that kind of payoff at the end, which something about it didn't really. I mean, it was great. It's a great idea. That's a great story. I wish that was the story. You know what I mean? And then it would have been different. But it didn't bring the same way. And I told Sean also, it reminded me, some of the movie reminded me of King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. You remember? You ever see that one?
The Guy Ritchie one? You know, I watched a little bit of it and I kind of fell asleep, so I never finished it. I've heard mixed things. I heard it was mostly bad, but I heard some people said it was bonkers and they kind of enjoyed it for how insane it was.
But there's some repetitive things there. But it still came off more of even the story that they had for him came off kind of King Arthur-ish. You know what I mean? The way that this story was portrayed. So.
And then they went Robin Hoodie though in parts of it, and you're just like,
right. It's a lot. It's a lot of different. It was. I think that's part of the problem. It was a lot of different characters for one person. I think you could probably break down like who Christian Bale is playing at any different point in the movie, and maybe it is always somebody else that he's.
And sometimes it is Moses, and sometimes it is,
and
sometimes it's Ridley Scott. Sometimes it's some other character.
Yeah.
And I don't really feel like the hero's journey, which it looked like he was going to start, actually didn't. And it just feels like there's many different plot lines. And I think you're right when you say it just ran away from him, because you have is it scientific? And like that understanding of, oh no, it's too late. It's destined. It's just gone. This is not in our hands. It is not science. Because he does they do kind of start to look at that with the dismissal of the religion. Then they look at but you don't actually understand how poorly the slaves are treated until you're like, oh, they have to be freed. Which was and then they had the actual thesis of the man who wrestles with God. And so you have it's just too much.
Well, yeah, I think they just didn't tell the story well from beginning to end. It was just kind of wavering and just kind of, what's your focal point? What are you really trying to do here?
I like the idea of if you take it away from Moses and just make him Christian Bale's man versus God, you have those points, like the character development, the beats. it's just tough when you have to hit all the other beats too.
I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it's just
like
I think the story. I think there's a lot of things, but I think it was just they couldn't quite. Yeah, they couldn't lock the story into the Moses narrative. You know what I mean? Whatever they were going for, they couldn't quite lock it into that, and then it just kind of spiraled all over.
Like if you found out halfway through that his name was actually Moses, you'd be like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." I guess.
And maybe there's all this other stuff like referencing King Arthur and Robin Hood and just the traditional hero's journey, because maybe they were trying to focus on other things so people would be less offended by their casting choices of where this story takes place. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just multiple writers and not a clear vision of what they wanted to do with the story.
It's got to be tough if you've got 4 people trying to write a story and everybody's got a different thing, and then people are like, well, you can't take my idea out, it's pretty good, you know. I'm like, yeah, but how does that work with this over here?
And you have the overall story you have to tell. Like that story,
that's tough.
Can't be changed and call it that. And then so you're the part where you make a movie 3 times, once as a screenwriter, once as a director, and then again as the editor. And I think each time they had too many people aside from the actual directing part. It's just too many people. The studio had notes, the writers had notes, the editors clearly were like, I don't know, whatever.
So I wonder if Ridley Scott was not in the editing room and the editor was just like, I don't know, how long does this movie got to be?
Well, you gave me 4 hours, and then I kind of just went like
at the end,
and now it's 2.5.
Cut it and print it. We're not spending any more money on it.
See, there's some plagues here. We got some plagues and some sea time, so we have it all.
Forget it.
So I wonder if Ridley Scott just gave up when the studio was like, it has to be no longer than 2.5 hours. And he's like,
could be.
He's like, you know what? You already greenlit my next one.
Could be.
I'm off to go prep The Martian.
Yeah, which was a much better movie and kind of gave him a little bit of a comeback, you know, which was a project he stepped into when the writer who was supposed to direct it decided to do a project that didn't happen. But
what was the one that he took from Villeneuve?
Oh, what did he take from Villeneuve? Did he take something from Villeneuve? Because Drew Goddard was going to do The Martian, who wrote the screenplay,
which would not have been good necessarily. I think that would have been too sarcastic.
Oh, you think it because of his writing style? You think it would have been more sarcastic had he directed it?
I think so. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate his sarcasm, but for something like that, because Villeneuve made Blade Runner 2049.
Yes, he directed Blade Runner 2049, which Blade Runner also deals with these themes as well. So this goes back all the way to Blade Runner with Ridley Scott.
And further. So it's just a lot of him looking at this. I'm trying to figure out, because I thought there was like a weird switch with The Martian. And I thought it might have been The Martian. I'm probably wrong. That's okay.
Yeah, I can't think of it. I don't think Villeneuve was attached to any of the other things he's done since this film. And yeah, I think he just ended up producing Blade Runner because he wanted to do Alien Covenant instead. So, but you mentioned something about some of his shots feeling Kubrick, Dan, and did you know he made a Napoleon movie that's going to be dropping on Apple TV at some point, really? Probably next year's when it's supposed to come out, though. He has threatened that it's ready to go and he'll put it on Apple TV right now if for awards contention, but I don't think it's going to happen. But that's how fast the man works. Like, you know,
because he really wanted the David money.
Yeah. So hats off to it. What is he?
Oh, 80? Yeah, that's the Joaquin Phoenix one. That's okay.
Wait.
Yeah, Joaquin Phoenix is playing Napoleon.
Oh, all right.
And then I mean, he had to get right to work on Disappointment Boulevard, so that must have been a little while ago because Disappointment Boulevard has been in production for a while, I feel like.
Oh wow. Okay. But yeah, I mentioned that because if you guys know, Kubrick spent decades trying to make a Napoleon movie.
Interesting.
Not that I think Scott's is going to be anything like the
No,
Kubrick production,
no, I
but
don't think he has time to do 200 takes a scene.
no, he doesn't. He doesn't have time for that. He's like, I got 2 other movies to make.
And like he always has them in the pipeline in different stages of development. So if he's editing one, he's already like pre-production on the other, with one in between that like has just went into the can kind of thing. And
him and Clint Eastwood, I think they're just making movies to stay alive.
and George Miller.
But George Miller spends like 5 to 10 years making one movie.
Oh man, I just want to see things, and I just want my David movie.
Yeah.
Long and the short of it.
But is there anything else we want to talk about Exodus? And yeah, this was 20th Century Fox, so that makes sense that maybe he did it to get
land on Disney Plus. Fantastic.
I don't know if the
maybe Hulu one day.
It's probably on Hulu.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else.
The score was kind of forgettable.
Yeah, score. Well,
there weren't
the cinematography was okay. I mean, I didn't really like the battle scene at all.
No, it was very CGI.
That's true. It was. That's very disappointing for Ridley Scott, who can do battle scenes.
Yeah, I really didn't like it.
He did get some body horror in during the plague, so that was
yeah, he definitely got that in, and that was okay.
Normally, I mean, I think it shows because usually his characters have motifs. They have a clear motif in the theme, and I cannot remember what music was even in this movie, which probably goes to the fact that he just was like, I don't know, put something.
Maybe.
Hit some notes, play some songs. Because to go back to like Prometheus, because that one bugged me like crazy the first time.
I did like when the sea came down and then whatever Moses came out of it, he was floating, but there was like dead animals and stuff floating around, and I thought that was interesting that he did stuff like that.
And there were consequences, and it was
that stuff like that was there were little detailed things that you don't consider that I think he threw in there.
And also how long it would take to carve that into tablets.
When he was doing the hammer thing at the end, I thought that was good. That I liked that little conversation between God and Moses when he was doing the.
By then he did feel like Moses.
By then he did. At the end he did.
He was.
But I think.
And then it was over.
And then it was over.
And then he was in old man makeup, and you're like, oh.
But that part where he's hammering and putting the thing, and they have that little chat conversation, I thought that was pretty good.
So I wonder if the other hour and a half is like that section of the movie.
That would be nice.
Because that would actually be the character study he was interested in. It's like, okay, this was all the preamble. I learned how to govern. I learned how to fight.
You're onto something, because if you look at it and you say, well, he wanted to do like a character study on this, I can see shades of that in the movie. But that always gets distracted by this narrative and this crazy loops that the story does. But I think that's interesting. Because it does feel at the end there, it feels like a character. It does feel like more like a character study,
And accepting the leadership and the cost of leadership.
It does appear that way.
He did initially want to call it Exodus.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted like more of the story, and they're like, we're only going to do it if you give us plagues.
Yep, we got to have that part of the Moses story. So maybe he was only interested in like the wandering in the desert and the 10 Commandments and all that stuff.
And there's certainly
the struggle of leading and like trying to get people and giving them hope, and that would make a lot more sense. Now that we've come to it, we figured it out.
We figured out what he wanted to do, but
the other hour and a half.
Yeah.
And like he just wanted to be like, okay, well, let's run through the plagues real quick so we get a reminder, like a previously on cold open.
Yeah.
Go.
Wow. Okay, so here are the ratings I came up for Ridley Scott. Since he had a commercial and art background, which is usually because most of his movies have a distinctive visual style to them, that's usually how you can tell it's a Ridley Scott film. If you love this movie, you'll think it's great. It's a masterpiece. Well, it's a work of art. If it hits its marks, it does its job. It's entertaining. We'll call it constructually sound. If you think this is something only for completionists or cinephiles, let's call it a deep dive. If it's mediocre, doesn't quite hit up to snuff, nice pat on the back, good effort. And then if it's just a garbage fire, a disaster, then it only belongs on Ridley's mommy's fridge.
Or you want me to go? I'm gonna say it's a deep dive. I'm gonna say it's
okay.
I say, you know what? If you like his other stuff and you want to see what he's doing, even if it's comparable to his other films, you can see the connection to the other films and to his thinking and the themes that he likes to do. And I mean, it's worth the watch if you like his other stuff, or maybe even if you don't and you just want to, whatever. It's worth a one-time watch. You know what I mean? You don't have to go back to it. I mean, definitely if you like if you're a fan in that sense, yeah, you should watch it. If it's but even if you aren't, it's worth one time around. You don't have to, you don't have to watch it again, but you might as well and see what's there.
It's well made. It looks good. It has his style. It's well acted despite the casting concerns. Like all of that, it's well made. Just, so it's not like horribly abrasive to watch. But I think you kind of need to watch this at least once. If you like it, good for you. Great. Enjoy. But I think it's important because it does track the 2010s for him, because you see him going through a lot of that. And I think it makes, for me, because we had actually previously just watched Prometheus recently because it was on IFC. You see that piece more, and you can see that he's really working through it in the 2010s.
Yeah, I mean, it's you might get something different out of it that you haven't seen in other of his films too. Something that we missed or something that we didn't notice. But
it was not as bad as
it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's not necessary. I wouldn't say it's like we're probably not going to watch it again, or we won't. There's nothing in it really sticks out to a point like, oh, I got to see that.
Except for the eyeliner. The eyeliner was great.
But I think I think deep dive is appropriate. I think it's good. I think that fits perfectly, and I think he put effort into it. It's not like it was just something they threw together. I think they just
clearly not like a blockbuster.
I think it was ambitious, overthinking. And trying to make it all work together while at the same time being trapped in your own kind of
everything,
whatever, your own boundaries. I think, but it's his work. It's obviously his work, and it's something that he put out there, and it's worth watching.
And I think he lost some of his authorship in the studio cuts and the notes and all that. I'm gonna hope.
Maybe.
I'm gonna hope.
Maybe. Either way, watch it once. Yeah.
And and you don't have to pay super attention to it. You don't have to be. It's not one of those where if you look away for a bit, you're gonna be totally lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're lost anyways.
Yeah. And you're gonna be like, "Wow, this thing's forever." And you're like, "Yeah,
it doesn't matter." Yeah, just have.
At a minute 140, you're like, "We're almost there."
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna give it a good effort. You guys, Sean especially, you kind of helped me. I didn't like the movie, but I didn't hate it like you guys. But you guys helped me kind of see a through line of maybe what attracted him to this movie. And I'm like you. Hopefully, there was something more there, and like maybe it got compromised, his authorship and what the story he wanted to tell with wrestling with a man and his faith and what his purpose is, and especially with him dealing with the loss of his brother Tony. So, and yeah, it does have a little more connection now than I would have thought. Oh, he just did this because they needed a big name director who could do historical epics and make it look good. But yeah, as a movie, you can tell, and like even bad movies, it's hard work. Like it's not like someone didn't care when they went and did their job. People work just as hard on good movies and bad movies alike. It's just
And he employed people.
Mhm.
Craft services must have been there. You had production assistants, like, and so I think it's important that he does get the chance to take the risks. Like, it's nice that he is successful enough that he can take a swing like this, even if it's not a hit. It's
Mhm.
important that he gives space to TV shows, because he then went on to produce a TV show. He gives space to other directors, and these films, it was a big budget film that made, a major release.
Mhm.
Even
Well, if it's kind of a boring, bland film, if it gave way to get Alien Covenant greenlit, then I'm glad he made the movie. And
That's good.
And I'm glad you guys didn't end up feeling like you were being tortured while watching it. So that made
our expectations were so low that
it helped.
It helped. It was fine.
Like, I'm just
it worked out. It worked out. It worked out.
So
well.
I'm glad you guys are like here yelling at me like, why did we have to watch this movie?
I think you gave me two choices, and this was like the better of the two.
I don't remember what else was still available at that time.
I'm grateful we picked this one.
So, but you can message me. We're doing Jim Henson, Frank Oz, and Ron Howard next. So you can message me what movie you like. If it's not open, I'll give you what is. And you can have, there's still a lot open. So you can pick what you think is good or what you like. So you're not having to scrape the bottom of the barrel. But if for giggles you ever wanted to do the Robert Langdon movies, you don't, because I would make you have to watch all three, because I don't want to do 3 separate episodes on those things. Yeah, no, don't do it, because
but that's more of a summer request.
Yeah.
Non-school year. That would be like my non-work.
Yeah. Thing. But thank you guys, and
thank you for having us.
Welcome.
Absolutely. I've loved our conversations, and happy Thanksgiving to y'all as well. And I'm I'm sorry the movie wasn't as good as True Grit.
Oh yeah, well, we lucked out with that.
Yeah, and now we've averaged out.
Now we're on the other end, but it's regardless, we'll give anything a try, even if it's
almost anything.
Well, so if there's, we don't mind the tough ones that we have to get through. It's all right. We like to watch.
As long as it produces a discussion, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Well, we got over an hour conversation about the movie, and we mostly stayed on topic.
We're halfway there to the runtime. So just like if this were to continue for another hour, it would also feel bloated and
we'd be going on tangents. But yes, thank you guys. Yes, have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and enjoy the rest of your time off, Sean.
Thanks.
All right.
Yeah.
Take care.
You too. Bye, guys.
Bye.